Politics is a dirty game, and the story of Agnes Nandutu should give us a lot to learn, because she went from a village girl washing her feet at the river before school to rubbing shoulders with top government officials when she became a minister, and finally she has ended up in Luzira prison serving 4 years for a scandal involving 2,000 iron sheets. This is the story. Listen. Alright guys, so Agnes Nandutu was born in Bududa, which is in eastern Uganda, and she says she comes from a humble background, and at the time of her childhood her parents separated, and so she grew up moving between stepmothers and grandparents, but her mother was around. Anyways, she talks about her earlier days attending school, but it was, very tough because she had to go to the garden, then after go to the river, wash her legs quick, put some Vaseline, and then run to school. Anyway, she managed to complete her elementary school, and she went to Bumwali Primary School, eventually going to Bulo Girls School, and then ending up at Bulucheke Secondary School. Anyways, upon all that, things were quite tough, and so Agnes Nandutu decided to attack what? Kampala City for opportunities. And so in 1997 she was introduced to Radio Uganda by her cousin, and she walked in and her story was never the same. So between 1997 and 2008, Agnes Nandutu provided a lot of freelancing services in order to what? To get something to survive Kampala City. And while working for Radio Uganda, she talks about meeting gentlemen such as Andrew Moziva and Mike Bwayo, who helped train her to become a better journalist. And on top of that, she started freelancing with Daily Monitor. And between 2002 and 2008, she worked at Impact FM before joining NTV, where she worked as the moderator for the People's Parliament, and also on Fridays, Point Blank. Agnes Nandutu, exposing a lot of corruption stories and stories involving minority groups. At the same time, Agnes Nandutu worked to advance her education by attending Uganda Institute of Business and Media Studies. And in fact, even in 2015, she went back to school and attempted to do A-levels. However, she failed. But then she did again in 2017 and succeeded. So eventually, Agnes Nandutu became a household name in Uganda because she used to cover a lot of these corruption stories and end with a catchphrase, Agnes Nandutu, point blank. However, in 2021, everything changed when she joined politics, which is a dirty game. Now listen. In 2020, Agnes Nandutu stood in the NRM primaries for Woman MP Bududa region, and she lost. However, in 2021, she talks about apparently she went to a prayer mountain, and after the prayer mountain, she came and she was staying in a room and found over 600,000 Uganda shillings. I don't know. And apparently she went back to Bududa and stood as an independent for Woman MP of Bududa, and she won. Anyway, guys, so she won. She became a member of parliament, but guess what? 6 months later, the president of Uganda appoints her as the minister for Karamoja Affairs, bro. What? This lady says that was probably the best day of her life, because she went from zero to hero right now. Anyways, a few moments later, now we have the office of the prime minister, who I will bring you guys her story another time. So the office of the prime minister wanted to support people in vulnerable regions of Karamoja, and so they put aside a budget of 40 billion Uganda shillings. And so out of those 40 billion Uganda shillings, they procured 10,000 iron sheets, which was supposed to go to vulnerable people in Karamoja. But apparently out of those 10,000, the project was launched in Moroto. Only 1,000 iron sheets reached the people of Karamoja, and apparently 2,000 iron sheets were delivered to Agnes Nandutu's what? Home farm, whatever, village farm. Oh my God. So apparently it says that in 2022, an assistant of Agnes Nandutu picked 2,000 iron sheets from the office of the prime minister's store and took them to Agnes Nandutu's what? Private farm. However, Nandutu denies that these iron sheets were actually for her personal gains. She said that they were gotten to support the people of Bududa. So this scandal is involving a lot of people, but magically Agnes Nandutu is the only one serving court a fine right now. And in fact, it is said that those 2,000 iron sheets were procured back, like they got them back, they found them intact, and she even apologized and paid 26 million Uganda shillings for the damages. However, Agnes Nandutu is still going to prison. But keep in mind, in the same conversation, in 2023, the Speaker of Parliament, Anita Among, addressed the Parliament and said, yes, I was also one of the beneficiaries of the iron sheets. I received 500 iron sheets. However, I already gave them out to my people, but I'm going to buy you guys another 500 iron sheets. So yes, she confessed to having one of those who benefited from the what? Iron sheets that were diverted from which were meant for vulnerable people. At the same time, the Minister of Finance, our favorite, comedian, also received iron sheets, but none of those ministers is serving sentence. So this is the statistics. Apparently, the scandal involves 22 ministers, 31 MPs, and 13 chief administrative officers. However, only Agnes Nandutu is in prison because she was the minister in charge of Karamoja. And even after giving back the 2,000 iron sheets and paying extra money, she is still going to serve time. Yet, people who swindled billions are still walking around. It talks about the selective justice in Uganda. I don't know what you guys think, but the story of Agnes Nandutu, it has a lot to teach us.